Let me make sure it is working. It is not. Now it is. You're
Now
good
it's
to go.
working.
Yeah.
Welcome to Book Bites with Maggie. I'm Maggie Carr. I'm the Youth Services Assistant here at Napanee Public Library. Joining me on today's episode, I brought back a retired staff member who gets all the time in the world to read now.
Yes,
Is that
that's true.
Yeah, so our theme is going to be mysteries and thrillers. So Pam, you kind of gravitate towards mysteries and
Me
thrillers.
too. Those are my favorites.
So we're coming at this from totally different perspectives. I myself do not seek them out, but I sometimes stumble upon them. So I found a couple that we can talk about, but I think you were going to be the highlight. You're going to give us titles.
Oh, no pressure.
No pressure. No pressure. But if you are watching us and you have another mystery or thriller that you think other viewers would like to hear about, please leave it in the comments. And when we're done being live here on Facebook, we will leave all of the books that we've talked about today in the comments for you to peruse at your discretion. And then as we're talking, I did write on the post on the back of your books the formats that books come in.
And I looked those up too, so yeah.
Very good. So here at the Napanee Public Library, we do have the physical book collection, but you can have access to our databases. We have Hoopla, which has all sorts of materials, electronic materials on it, as well as books, ebooks, audiobooks, all that stuff. And we have Libby, which has books and ebooks on it as well. So you have access to an abundance of things, even outside of our walls. The first book that I wanted to share with you is The Dry. We don't have the physical book in our collection. I read this as an e-audio book, but I thought it was fantastic because it's Australian. So the narrator of the book came with an accent, an Australian accent.
Sure.
So I just loved that. I think it added to the story. Have you read The Dry?
No.
So this is Jane Harper's debut from 2017, and it's not normal for a new author to get as much hubbub as this one did. Like, it was everywhere. I think this one was like on the cover of Book List. I had gotten lots of emails about it. I was like, as a debut author, that's fanfare. So I read it. It is unlike anything that I had read to that point. Kept me guessing. It's listed as fiction, but it's got that mystery element and characters that you loathe, and then characters that you loved that then you were just so angry at. So it got that thriller anticipation of one page after another, leading the storyline through to completion, and it still sticks with me. Aaron Falk is the lead detective in this book. There is a second book in his series, and then there hasn't been any recently, so I don't know if it's just going to end up being a duology or if Jane Harper will come back with more titles in this series. But The Dry kept me guessing, and it might be one that you like to read too. We have it as an ebook, an e-audio, and it's also been made into a movie, but I haven't seen it. Have you watched it?
I haven't seen it.
That has Eric, do you say Bana or Bana? I don't know. Eric Bana is the actor in that one. So I'll have to get that on my radar too. But there is my first title. And it was more like real life scary than like psychologically driven.
Okay.
So I
right.
think your stuff is going to be a little bit more scary.
Some
than
of
mine.
it, yes.
That's okay.
So speaking of psychologically scary, my first book is a Stephen King book because he is probably my favorite author. So I have a couple in my pile that are
Not
Stephen
just
King.
favorite author from a genre, but just favorite author.
Favorite author, yes. I think I have every one of his books.
Like
too.
you own them?
I own them, yes. So that's how.
You don't have a whole bookshelf of Stephen King.
I do, because he has a lot. Yeah. And they're still coming.
Yeah.
This is a little bit older one. Gwendy's Button Box is actually the first in a series, and there are 3 of them. And it's co-written by someone called Richard Chismar, I'm going to say is how you pronounce the name. So it takes place in Castle Rock because it is an older one. And it's about a little girl, Wendy, who's 12 years old, and she is hiking one day, and she goes up this hill, and there's a man sitting there in a suit with a little black hat,
Not
and
creepy at all.
he calls her over and talks to her a little bit. He ends up giving her a button box, and these buttons on this box can change her life, and they can change the world. And so really the book is about how can she keep herself from using this button box? When she gets angry at something or something happens, she could use this box, but she knows the consequences. So this, and then this goes on, the next two books, the other one is when she's an adult, and then the third one is when she's an older person. So anyway.
That is something
Very
so
good.
creepy.
Yes. Oh, and it is a book, an ebook, and an e-audio book. So
And it's a trilogy.
it is a trilogy.
Is the next book that you have a standalone or part of a series too?
It is a standalone.
Okay, let's do that one too.
Okay. All right. So this is a Slow Fire Burning. This is by Paula Hawkins, and this is more of a mystery. It's not a psychological thing. And this young man is found murdered in a houseboat in London, and the investigators are looking at 3 different women, and one is a one-night stand from the night before. The other one is his aunt, and the third one is his nosy next-door neighbor. So they're looking at the 3 of them, and these 3 separate connections they all have to this victim, but they all have some sort of resentment with him. So basically the story is a really good mystery that's looking at these 3 women and deciding who done it. And this
Was it one of the 3?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yeah. So this comes as a physical book, an e-book, and an e-audio book.
That author sounds familiar. Does it say what else? Does she have like something underwater?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's, she did The Girl on the Train. Yeah, Into the Water.
Into the Water. I think I read that one by her, and that one was like creepy. Did you read that?
No, I didn't, but I read The Girl on the Train, which was really good.
I think, unless I'm getting them confused, that's the one with the suitcase, I think. But it kept me guessing.
Yes, she's good at that. She's a good author.
I like, so is this kind of have a detective element to
A little
it?
bit, yes.
Or it's more from like the relationship standpoint, more like...
No, it's more about people investigating it and looking at these 3 women, so more detective.
So I have one that's kind of like that. Have you read Oliver Burke?
No.
She is a co-author. Oh, I just totally went to blank. She wrote books with somebody for a long time and a major mystery author. Totally went to blank on that one. But then she started writing books as herself and not just co-writing them. And The Wife was recommended to me by another previous staff member, and now I try to read all of her books. This one felt like, and I don't watch a lot of TV, but like one show that I watch over and over again is Law and Order SVU.
Oh, yes.
Do you like that one?
Yes, very much.
Okay, so I felt like this gave me like Olivia Benson feels.
Sure.
And it's about a husband and wife who one is cast into the limelight through unforeseen circumstances. Hey, who did she co-write with for a super long time? Mary Higgins Clark.
Yes.
Yes. See, I just had to come up with it. Okay, so Oliver Burke co-wrote with Mary Higgins Clark for quite a while, and now has some standalones. Another famous mystery writer. But in this one, an affair is reported by the like a college student, and comes in the middle of this marriage, and then the wife has to decide if she wants to trust her husband or take these allegations seriously. And so it goes back and forth from different standpoints, and the he said, she said of it is just, it was probably the best he said, she said themed book that I had listened to or read in a super long time. But it also kind of gave me some Elizabeth Smart feels. So like the kidnapping and like the lack of information in the news and all kinds of things. But I definitely have read 1, 2, 3. I have sister. I think I've read 4 of hers now. So this one left an impression that I wanted to keep reading. And again, since it's not my go-to genre, that's kind of really telling to me.
It is. I'll have to put that on my list.
It is. This one we only have available as a book. So don't take it on the beach, even though it's like a sandy looking beach book. You don't want to get it wet.
Okay, my next one is also another detective type book. Good Girl, Bad Girl, and actually it's part of a series, but not the story itself. It's kind of like, if you've ever, like Michael Connelly, who has the same investigator.
Okay, but
type
different
thing,
mysteries,
but
different investigations.
Stories. Yeah,
Okay.
so Cyrus Haven is the detective in this one.
Is that a boy or a girl?
It's a boy.
Okay.
A man, yes. And they find a young girl, and they don't know her age. She's in this room, locked up in this room, hiding. And they don't know how old she is because she's so emaciated because she's been starved. And there's obviously been a murder in the room next to where she is. And so he is trying to solve, without any help from this girl who's probably seen everything but is traumatized, is trying to solve this murder. So he develops a relationship with this girl and kind of takes her under his wing and kind of makes sure that she's taken care of. And so it follows her through her development, and then you really don't know for a long time what she's seen, what she's keeping from people. So it's another good whodunit. Ooh. Very good. But anyway, if you
I've never even heard of that one.
Yes, then you would like others that.
Good Girl,
yes.
Bad Girl.
Yeah, Good Girl, Bad Girl.
And Michael is a.
I'm sorry, Michael Robothon. It's a book, a physical book. It's a large print book, and it's an e-audio.
Okay. I like ones that don't. Like, I could read one book in a series and not feel like I don't have the complete picture if I just stop and I quit reading the series.
And yet you feel like you know the main character because they've been in other books too. So
no, that makes sense. But okay, Michael Robothon. I'll have to remember that one too.
Yeah.
We'll put all these books in the comments so that you can reflect back on them, or if there's books that you wanted to seek out, you'll be able to do that. Have you read The Last Mrs. Parrish?
No.
Okay, Liv Constantine is the pen name for sisters, Lynn and somebody, Beverly. Like it mixes their names together.
Oh.
But it's two sisters that write together under one pen name. It is the debut, I believe, for them from 2017. This was a Reese Witherspoon book club pick, and that's why it made it on my radar. Honestly, I probably never would have picked it up otherwise because it deals with an affair, and it deals with a narrator that you want to loathe. Like, I could not wrap my head around why any author or set of authors would want to write from a standpoint of some character that you just hated from the get-go. Mm-hmm. She's a gold digger, she's manipulative, she's a narcissist, she's everything that you want to hate about a person. And then that's who your story is coming from. And it's her deepest desire to get into the middle of a marriage that she considers picture perfect, and driving a wedge in it and becoming a mother to their children, becoming a wife to the husband, and replacing the wife. Mm-hmm. I almost gave up over and over and over again, but the drama just kept building, and I knew that I'd have more questions if I quit reading than if I just finished it. And I'm glad that I did, because the second half of the story, it's like split down the middle. And so it's going to have two completely different points of view. So the second half of the story is written from the wife's perspective. Ooh. And how much she is not oblivious to. She kind of sees what's happening, and she's using it to her own advantage. And the story goes from being what you think is the entire world to just being a minute portion of what the bigger picture is. And if it had been told in reverse, I don't think it would have become the bestseller that it did, because it just kept growing. When I was looking up what formats we had this book in here in our collection, I was absolutely stunned to see that there is a follow-up book coming. Oh. They're still writing it, but it's called The Next Mrs. Parrish, and it's going to continue on with Amber, who is the mistress, the the one you loathe, and it's going to be more from her perspective, at least from what I'm seeing online right now. So we'll have to wait and see. If you are a reader who likes to read books boom boom, you might want to hold off on reading this one until that next one is closer to being read. Yeah. Otherwise, I think that before I would read that one, I'd have to go back in because there's so many little details that I'm sure I've forgotten about the last Mrs. Parrish that will add to that storyline. So we'll have to see how that goes.
Book? I mean,
Like they're still writing it.
no, this one.
This one is from 2017.
But is it a complete book in that?
Yes,
Yeah.
you could absolutely, like, I wouldn't have even guessed that this was going to be like a first in a series, a first in a duology, because it does, you have enough completion and enough feeling of being finished that you're not waiting. There's no cliffhangers or anything like that. But it stayed with me for quite a while. So this one is a book, an ebook, and an e-audio book. So maybe you will like The Last Mrs. Parrish as well.
Well, here's my second Stephen King book. And this is a newer one. It's called Billy Summers. And Billy Summers is about a man, Billy, who was in the Iraqi war. And he was trained as a sniper. And he's very, very good. Well, he gets out of the war and is hired by this man to do hits, like a bad person,
Okay.
to do hits.
Back on American soil?
Back on American soil.
Okay.
And he kills people for money. So he's very good, but they also call him Houdini because he's good at, after he makes the shot, he disappears and nobody can ever find him, right? So he's very good at his job. The one thing he always asks when he is hired to do a job is, was this a bad person? Because he won't just go kill someone. He needs to know that they did something bad before he'll take them out,
Okay.
right? Okay.
So does he have like kind of a vigilante perspective, like, or it calms him to know that
It makes
he's
him
helping society?
Yes, that's
Okay.
it. It makes him feel better to know that this is a bad person and he's getting rid of, right? The other thing that he does is the person who usually hires him, the guy's name is Nick, he plays dumb. They all think that he isn't very bright.
That Nick isn't very bright?
No, that
The
Billy
sniper.
Billy
Okay.
is not very bright. When actually he is very bright, but he hides that from everybody. So he decides he wants to retire. It's been a few years that he's been doing this, and he feels like he's done. And so he tells Nick, I want to retire. I'm done doing this. And he says, well, will you do one more for me? And if you're successful, I will give you $2 million. So you'll be able to retire however you want, mm-hmm. right? And he asks the question, is this a bad person? And he says, oh, yes. And so he goes about the hit and disappears. And that's kind of where the story really gets started.
Okay.
Because he does something that he shouldn't do. And so the people, not only that, the person he shot, the police and all that are looking for him, but Nick and his mafia group are also looking for him.
Because he did something
he did something that he wasn't supposed to do when he did this hit. So anyway, it was just a really good, I'll even admit some of his books are, they're okay, mm-hmm. but this one was a really good book.
Did you read this?
Did Pam just say Stephen King books
some
are just
books,
okay?
Yeah, well, if you read The Cell, maybe.
No, I have not read Billy Summers, but it sounds a lot like John Wick. The action movies. Sounds cool.
It sounds very fast paced.
Yes, it is. It is. And Billy Summers is available as a physical book here, an audiobook, an e-audiobook, and an e-book. So many different formats.
That's not uncommon for Stephen King.
Right, plus it's a newer one,
yeah.
So.
But this is your very own copy.
It is my very own copy.
Pam, have you read Fairy Tale?
I have it, and I haven't started it yet. I had to read the winners, right? I had to get through that first,
okay.
So.
I'm so excited. I loved that book.
I did too.
I zipped through it, even though it was huge. Back during the pandemic, I think I read a lot during the pandemic. You were home, all these things. Chris Bojalian is an author that I picked up, several years ago. I think the first one I read from him was The Flight Attendant. Did you read that one?
I read that one, yes.
And that one, again, totally kept me guessing. And so now I try to I haven't read everything that he has written, but I've read quite a few of them. This was a brand new one that came out during the pandemic, and so I snatched it up. I read it pretty quickly, but I don't think that when it was being written, the timeline on when it was coming out could have been better. It is about a pandemic in New York City, but the storyline flips back and forth between the United States and Vietnam. And these, this couple, they're in a romantic relationship. One saves the other from a gunshot wound, and 6 months later, they go on this trip to Vietnam where he disappears. And she is left trying to figure out who was this person that I have been with and spent 6 months with. And the backstory is just absolutely unraveling. And it's a whodunit with a psychological thriller, and then you add in the element of something absolutely taking over the world in the pandemic sense. When I was reading this, we still didn't know much about the coronavirus. We didn't know how it transmitted. And I was reading it, and people were like still like wiping down their groceries and stuff like this. And in this, it is transferred with rats and all kinds of things. So it's different, but at the same time, like you're living in the psychological thriller. So it added to the storyline for me. We had this book in a book. It's also available as a large print and an e-audio book. And it just, I don't know if I reread it now, if it would hit all the same points as it did being right in the middle of
During
the
the pandemic,
Yeah.
sure.
But it definitely humanizes why somebody might create a virus with ill intent and what could happen if it gets into the hands of somebody who shouldn't have it. So it just a bigger picture. You know, I see here your next book is another book on a houseboat, and I think that's hilarious because you had a houseboat in another book.
That's true, and I didn't even choose it that way. But, anyway. The last thing he told me, I'm sure a lot of people have read this, it was pretty popular, it was Reese's Book Club. And it's about a couple, and he has a stepdaughter that lives with them, and the stepdaughter doesn't really want anything to do with her stepmother. And one day he slips a note to his wife that just says, protect her, and then he disappears. And they spend a long time looking for him, and finally, the stepmother and the stepdaughter develop a relationship because they have to
They're grieving
get together and try to figure out where he is. So anyway, the FBI is involved. There are a lot of people involved looking for him, and so it's kind of not a whodunit, but a where is he kind of book, and a missing person kind of book. So, yeah.
I read that one when I was on vacation in Arizona, and so like I tie that to cacti, and it has nothing to do with the story, but like
What did you say about a houseboat?
they live on a houseboat in the story, in the setting in Washington. I don't specifically remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
I read Laura Dave's other book, 800 Grapes, and now it's just easy to remember there's 800 grapes in a bottle of wine. That was my takeaway. But this one I did read too, and it was good.
Okay.
So it's a book,
so-
an ebook, an e-audio,
Yes.
and it's being made into a mini series on Apple TV Plus. So with Jennifer Garner. Which did you ever watch Alias?
Yes.
Can we get Alias on Cirques? I want to rewatch that show. I
That was a good one.
was way ahead of my time watching that show as a kid. Did you ever watch Alias? You have no idea what I'm talking about. And I was like, what's her hair going to be like in the next scene?
Right.
What is she
What's
wearing
she
in the
gonna
next
do?
scene?
Yeah.
Like, she was just like this incognito person. It was a fun series. So that casting just makes sense to me. I think that'll be a really good.
You just have to have Apple TV to see it.
I'll have to find a friend that has Apple
Yeah.
TV to see it.
Yeah.
Okay, you got one more book for us.
I do.
Now, so many of the books that we've had here are fiction, but your next one is not.
It's not. That's why I chose it. It was such a great book, but it is nonfiction. So the less people know about us
It's checked out.
is checked out. So written by Axton Betts Hamilton, and she grew up in Portland, Indiana, and a very small town in the 90s. And this book starts when she was 11, and her parents had their identity stolen. And so they lost their credit rating. They were always fighting about money. This was before the internet, so they didn't really have a way to look at things more closely, without the internet. So they would change all their information, and then they would move, but it would still, whoever was
Catch up
doing
to 'em.
this would follow them, right? Have you read this? Okay. So, so finally she grows up, and her identity is stolen as well.
The little girls.
Yes. When she grows up, her identity is stolen. She goes off to college, but she's always trying to solve this mystery, right? And so she does solve it at the end of the book. I mean, it's nonfiction, so
So it's a
Give it away.
I'm not going to
it's a
give it away.
memoir.
I'm not. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So she does solve what happens, and it's just
It's
read it and
somebody
you go,
too close to
"What?"
home.
Yes.
Shocking.
It's shocking.
Does the dad have another family?
No. Don't guess, because I don't want to have to tell
Okay.
you. But no, he does not have another family.
Do we have a task about reading an Indiana book?
No, not this year.
Not this year. That would be a good one for that.
It would be a very
I think
good one.
I
yes.
think Brittany has that one on a display right now. She's got books
Yes, I think she
in
does.
or about Indiana, and maybe that's how that one got picked up so quickly.
Well, this one is a physical book on the display. I think it's checked out right now. It's also e-audio and an e-book, and like I said, it's nonfiction. So
Good. I'm gonna have to put that one on my radar.
Yes.
Just because you've enticed me
Yes,
with
it's-
so many of your titles. This is not my go-to genre, and you got some that made me go, I should try to read that. But sometimes real life can be just scary enough. You need displacement, and don't do what I did and read a pandemic book during the pandemic. If any of these books rung a bell or they sounded like something you'd want to read, let us know in the comments. We'd be happy to set them aside for you to pick up. Library card restrictions do apply, but we're happy to put those on hold for you if we are able to. We only have 2 Book Bites with Maggie episodes left that'll be live here on Facebook. In December, the first one is going to be featuring debut books from 2022. That is one of the tasks
Debut
from
authors. Debut authors.
Debut authors from Expand Your Horizons 2022 task list. And then the second one, we're going to do some favorites, I believe. And so that one might not be live. That might be a patched together episode. But it's exciting to see some of these books that are coming through and how some of them fit different topics that we've hit on different episodes. In January, we're going to move to a podcast. So hopefully that will keep those of you who are enjoying what we're doing here on Facebook Live, and you'll enjoy it at your own time frame and disposal for a podcast. So it's exciting. Pam, thank you for joining
I
me
had so
today.
much fun. Thank you for having me here.
I'm so glad that you enjoy this genre and you could add so many great titles to it.
Thanks.
Until next time, we'll see you later.